So, Brian, I'm somebody who's done some negotiation training. I've read a book on negotiation. So it's not like a totally new world to me, but I know there's a lot to know here. There's a huge subject, right? There's lots of books written on the topic of negotiation, and I've read Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, and I've done some training. But in the pre-interview, we talked about the fact that you say, like, most of what people know about negotiation, as far as for enterprise sales specifically, is wrong, is out of date, is not working. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, it'll probably help a little bit to go back historically. So I was an enterprise sales VP, right? I was a negotiation consultant, and I had been leaning on a lot of the. In fact, my business partner was a negotiation professor at Harvard, so I was leaning on all the traditional stuff that I knew as well. And most of us think of negotiation as sort of a soft skill, right? And
Yep.
you kind of never know what the other side is going to do. So they don't think of it as a repeatable process or something that you can forecast. And so if you look at negotiation books, there is literally 99 negotiation strategies, 101 negotiating tips. And the latest one I've seen is the 53 truths of negotiation. So if you think you never know what's going to happen, it's sort of like you're going on a hunt, and you need all these different weapons and all these, because you don't know
Yep.
what's really going to work. And so that's how
Yep.
people think of negotiation, is that it follows no patterns. You never know what the heck's going to happen. So therefore, I have to be prepared for pretty much everything.
Yep. Now, in the little bit of negotiation training I've had, like, there has been some training on, like, you want to try to get all the information. Well, first you want to at least establish, what do you want? What does success look like for you? What does the walk point look like for you? Like, if you can't get this deal, then you're walking from the deal. So you have to at least establish, like, what the boundaries of what you're hoping for are. Um, but I can kind of see where you're going with this, because I've heard a lot of tactics like the flinch,
Yeah,
right? If they throw out a quote and you're like, oh, and you react to it in such a way, maybe more subtly than I just did, like a whoa,
yeah.
but to give them kind of the feeling that, oh, maybe they overshot it, right? You're saying, like, tactics like that, those aren't going to get you very far, at least not in enterprise sales.
Well, buyers are taught with a lot of tactics, and those tactics are very effective to sellers, right? Because many times they have the absence of a really good plan. So, in the absence of a plan, there's a thing in negotiation called anchoring. The other side's anchor has huge impact. You react to that if you don't have a plan. Buyers are taught this thing of nibbling, right? Where they come back after the
Yeah.
fact and they ask for just a little more, and they nibble, nibble,
Yeah.
nibble. And so the reality is that if you're not preparing in a systematic way, and maybe I wouldn't even say the other side, the buyer is preparing a systematic way, but they do have a set of tricks that work. And my fallback is, if you want to counter tricks with tricks, then you're really not gaining much. And especially in terms of relationship, if I'm playing games, if you're my
Yeah.
buyer and I'm playing
Yeah.
games with you, that doesn't really work. And I do like to say that facts trump tricks every time. So but if you're trying to react to the other side's tricks and anticipate the other side tricks, there's so many things that they can do that it's virtually impossible to do that. I mean, unless you're like an AI psychologist in your brain and you can map all that stuff out. Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why you're saying that, at least from what I from you, is that it's a soft skill and that it's kind of a dance, right? Learning how to do trick for trick. They throw out their tricks, you throw out your tricks, and onwards we go with this negotiation dance, this psychological warfare thing going on in order to get the best deal for each one's trying to get the best deal. And you're saying that if we're playing that game, is it generally going to be a losing proposition? Um, Unless you have somebody that has that kind of soft skill that knows how to dance that dance really well? Or are you saying, like, that there's just a better method that, if you just apply this better method, like, you don't even have to dance that dance anymore?
Yeah, there is a better method, and it's sort of like, I've had people ask me, what happens when the other side yells at you? It's like there could be, what happens when the other side, there's a long list of that, right? And when the other side yells at you, by the way, it's like, I really don't care. If you're focusing on facts and you have a very systematic approach, you don't really care. I don't care about the delivery tone that comes to me. But this stuff is I think the thing is for buyers, it's really, really effective. Right. In fact, the most common buyer tactic in the world is I can get the same thing from your competitor cheaper. And they keep saying that because it works. In the absence of a really good plan from a salesperson, those tactics are really, really effective. And if you're going to try to counter that with another trick, it's break even at best, maybe, to answer your question.
Ah.
Yeah.
So you're saying the skills, the soft skills are going to favor the buyer almost every time.
Yeah. Because yeah.
Yeah. Because they're the ones with the power. They're the ones who have the money, right? So they have the power of the choice in this deal. So the soft skills are always going to lend the skills to their favor.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very hard to scale soft skills. It's very hard to repeat them, right? It's so dynamic when you think of two. And these days, many times there's a couple players on each side of the table, so everybody's firing these arrows. And if that's what you're trying to focus on, the 101 truths, the 99 strategies, it's those make for very interesting classes. And I think what's happened over the years is a lot of sales VPs have run their teams through negotiating classes, and they walk out of the class and they say, wow, that was really interesting. And I really like Dan. He was a great facilitator. And so they walk away and say, that was a great training class because people liked it. There's a massive difference. And I think you talked about like hostage negotiating. It's fascinating and it's very cool. And I actually like listening to some of those videos. It's a very difficult thing to scale and to use and to anticipate and to repeat, kind of, to install a process into the organization. It's very difficult to install a process of soft skills. And that, it still goes back down to this fundamental, this base that we believe that you never know what's going to happen. And tips and tricks and psychological skills, where you sit at the table, all those kinds of things. What happens. I just heard this last week, someone saying, well, now everything's on Zoom and the buyers don't use their camera. What should we do with that kind of thing? And it's like those things will come at you all day long. And it's this constant frantic, yikes, how do I pull into the 80 arrows I have in my quiver and just, is it arrow 57 that I pull out now in response to their arrow 27? It's virtually impossible. And it's kind of crazy to me. Like I said, having done this for a while, having written books on it, having worked with a Harvard professor building our content, I fell into that same notion of building a solution that's based on misdiagnosing the problem of negotiation. And so in the main, what I would tell you, the sort of foundation or the soul of this problem is we believe this is the problem. So then therefore we architect a solution that, and that's what's broken and that's what's missed. In fact, I ended up buying my partner out from Harvard because after many years of doing this, I'm like, no, that's kind of just more of the same. It's more of the same. And it's interesting and it's fun again, but it's not effective.
Yeah. So maybe you do a sales training with 100 reps, of these old tactics and all the different tips and tricks you can use to try to get your buyer to move. I'd expect that a few of them would pick it up because a few of them maybe already had some of these soft skills naturally. And with learning just a few pieces, they can become like a little Chris Voss and can use these negotiation skills in order to win. But what happens as a result of teaching these regularly to your sales force, to a company?
What comes to mind as you were saying that is, I've had people say to me, the great thing about negotiation training is you walk away with one or two things, you're good. And so that's kind of what I'm hearing you saying, that maybe someone learns a thing that works in a moment. And by the way, no, my answer to that is absolutely not. Like, you take sales reps out of market for a couple of days, and your entire, they do the smile sheets. They say, I liked it. They walk away with one or two things that's worth it. Absolutely not. But that's the sort of common belief with this. That's the standard at which negotiation is held, which is just, it's a terrible standard to say, I'm going to spend this money on the training. I'm going to lose this opportunity cost of people being out of market. And if they put a smile on the sheet and they learn one or two things that were cool, then it's worth it.
Productive.
It feels productive. and by the way, it's checked off my list. As the leader, I can go back to whoever and say, yes, our people are terrible at negotiating. They're getting their butt kicked by procurement. And we did negotiation training. And you know what? Most things are going to remain the same. But it's like back to what you were saying earlier. If a rep learns one or two things, my old partner, the Harvard professor, who's still my friend, he used to say that it's sort of like Vegas. On balance, it's a mathematical fact that we lose. Everybody that goes to the house wins more often, but people keep going. And his point is they keep going because every now and then they win. And I think that's the other thing I was thinking about when you asked that question is yeah, I went through the training and I got this cute little thing and I did it and it kind of helped me, so it was worth it. And that's the standard at which negotiation is held. And even if you look back to sales training was that way. If you go back 20 years ago, sales training was all interpersonal skills only, right? And it was many, many years. It was like Miller Hyman and a couple other that came out with this notion that selling is a process. It's a step by step. You can map it out. You can architect it, and that was a massive shift, right? Salespeople was all about personality skills, and literally look at the pictures on his desk. It was that long ago, and compliment his family. That was the extent, and that's kind of negotiation training for the most part is like 20 years behind where sales training is. Sales training is much more analytical and step by step now.
What does it look like if companies continue to stick with the tips and tricks method of negotiation training?
Well,
Like what happens to their sales?
well, whatever's currently happening is going to keep happening. So something motivated you. We often think of it this way: like organizations, they feel pain in negotiation, late stage stuff. They're getting clocked. ASP is down, margins are down, procurement's kicking their butt, and so they say, "Oh, we should do this," and then they do it, and it kind of remains the same, but it's checked off the list, and everybody says we are happy. But have behaviors changed? Have outcomes changed? Negotiations about like leading and lagging indicators. If you want to take your margins up, you have to look upstream and determine what do we have to be trading in and out of deals. Get rid of those things that kill our margins, bring in more things that add to margins. Tips and tricks is not going to get you there. It's not going to give you the chops to scale that across your organization. And recently, for a project we were working on, we interviewed 40 VPs of sales and heads of sales enablement. And almost everybody's frustrated with their late stage. How well am I doing at prepping for a negotiation and getting deals closed? And also, almost all of them had done negotiation training. And we asked the question, what impact did it have on your negotiation? Did anything happen after the trainers left? And the answer was, and 100% with all 40 of these companies we talked to, the answer was no. But we did check it off the list. People liked it. And yeah, we probably got a couple things out of it, so it was probably okay. So everything remained the same. And I want to contrast that. I keep talking about like the problem with it. An organization we worked with was a fleet rental company, and they wanted more fuel escalation clauses in their contract, right? It shifts risk kind of back to the buyer, or more balances risk as gas prices shift around. And they got trained on how to bring fuel escalation clauses into contracts, not any tip or trick, and went from 20 to almost 80% of deals had fuel escalation clauses in there, which radically shifted their profit margins. That was the number one thing that the CFO said was going to impact margins. That's a contrast to tips and tricks. It's no, how do we execute our strategy one deal at a time? What's the strategy of the people who own deal approval, whether it's pricing or T's and C's, and how do we do those things better? That makes a big difference.
So in all of this, what I hear you saying is that, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. The tips and tricks and shortcuts to negotiation aren't working. In fact, it's more akin to the sales training from decades past that we all knew wasn't effective or efficient in scaling across the sales organization. So what I'm looking forward to in our next episode is scaling into or looking at what is effective, how to build an actual negotiation plan. And I've heard you say that 97% of deals follow a pattern. And if we can identify the pattern, we can build a plan.
Yeah. And the question is, if you were a VP of sales, hey, Dan, if I could tell you have 300 salespeople, doing 2,000 deals a year, if I could tell you within 97% probability what was going to happen in all those negotiations over the next year, how would that impact your planning and your outcomes of your deals. Yeah, and it's funny too when I talk about negotiation being broken. One other thing I wanted to add in is that the same thing holds true with global negotiation. Everybody says, well, it's all different. And the first time I worked in Japan, I had a Japanese rep say, you don't get it. It's different than America. That's another commonly held belief. One is that negotiation is soft skills. You never know what's going to happen. Negotiation is different all over the world. All of those are wrong, by the way. And we have some pretty good evidence to back that up. But again, then the approach for global negotiation is also built based on the fact that it's going to be different everywhere you go. And there's a certain piece of it that isn't. It's exactly the same. And that's where the win comes in, is saying, I know what's going to happen. I know how to prepare for that.
Well, fantastic. Can't wait to jump in with you on the next episode to talk about what is working, since now it's obvious what's not working.